the first question that I have for the panel, just so you all have a little context, please share with us your concise definition of inclusive leadership and also the greatest benefit that your business has gained from your inclusive leadership style.
I run our construction business at Lendlease, and at Lendlease, a bit of a plug for Lendlease, we like to say that we create the best places. And you can't create the best places unless you have the best people. That's a pretty good answer to both questions, I think. For me, inclusiveness at Lendlease and inclusive for me as a leader is making sure that what I've created is an open and honest environment, one of which my job is about listening and encouraging, and everybody else, think of that as everybody else in a team context, everybody else is contributing and offering everything that they can put onto the table. We have never succeeded when we have restricted the views of everybody coming to a project. And projects like Barangaroo, that just down the road, but even this one that we built in the 90s, which is a bit difficult to find sometimes and far away, these aspirational and what I'd like to think visionary precincts and places, I always look back and they've been created by great people, diverse people, people who have had a voice, have had a view, haven't had an opinion, and that's been cherished, relished, encouraged, and it's been brought to bear. I've seen the opposite in some projects in Lendlease where a leader has dictated this is the style, this is the outcome, everybody get on board, this is the way it's going to be. We don't end up with the best places in that regard. So I see my job as a leader of a construction business is to be bringing in, encouraging different people, diverse people, all people, to ensure that they're sharing their views, their opinions as to what can make a great place.
I was one of those people that hesitated when Di contacted me because I thought I'm not a traditional people leader per se. In saying that though, I know that lots of women do that, so she reminded me and I was like, yeah, you're right, I'll have to stop myself. And I think in terms of inclusionary leadership, it's being able to get your people, and whatever context that is, whether it's in business or in community or broadly speaking, because leadership is very broad, to be able to bring both a sense of uniqueness and also feel a sense of belonging. So by uniqueness, it's about being able to celebrate difference, and I say celebrate, not tolerate. It's because you tolerate a bad smell. That's where tolerance is used. I think that's why for me it's about celebration of difference, because ultimately, and that's why I'm very big on normalising normality, the other aspect around belonging is making sure they also feel part of the team. So celebrating their difference, but also making them feel like they belong.
Those answers are great answers, and in a sense, I agree and believe the same. It's ultimately about creating an environment where people can be the best they can be, and I often sort of, it's a little bit second nature for me, and I tell a story in the book about my father and the influence that he had on me. And the story was my brother and I playing with our sister in the backyard, and we were mucking around doing something, and one of us, I can't remember which one, said to our sister, "You can't do that because you're a girl." And the back door kicked open and Dad came running down the ramp after us, and we didn't really know what we'd done. But he grabbed the two of us and he pulled our faces right next to his face, and he said, "If I ever hear you tell her she can't do what you can do, I'll kill you. Do you understand me?" And so gender equity was made pretty clear to me at that point. And it's funny because I've reflected more on him. I've never ever heard my father ever say anything demeaning about a person's gender, race, background. He won't even venture into a conversation like that. He'll shut it down. He certainly beat me up every time I bought into what, say, society or workplaces I was in might have made me start to, I guess, get drawn towards because of the way it is. So I think for me it really is about, not just potential, but not judging people on any other basis than on what they contribute. So it's as simple as that, I think, for me.
Well, I certainly concur with everything that's already said, but for me, inclusive leadership is about those leaders that really value the benefit of creating a diverse and inclusive workplace and also promoting a culture where everybody can actually bring all of themselves to work, irrespective of what cultural background you're from. You should be able to come to work and bring all of yourself to work and be proud of your heritage. And that goes for irrespective of your age, whether you're 65 or 25, you should be able to bring all of yourself knowing that there's not going to be any bias of your age. That also applies to sexual orientation. There's no reason you need to hide anything. Be yourself. And also goes to around disability. And we need to make sure that we create that environment. And we create that environment where people have a sense of belonging, because that provides so much benefits. And for me, I know that the businesses that I've led before and my previous business, which I've shifted on since then, I knew that I had people from 36 different cultures working in my team. And I looked at how I can actually connect them to their communities, because I saw that as a competitive advantage. And that's really, really important. I also knew that the average age of my team was 42.8 years. And I actually made sure that there was no bias, unconscious or conscious bias, because that's the key. If people can come to work every single day feeling proud they can bring all of themselves, they're going to be far more productive. And in my workplace, I can actually demonstrate that philosophy. Because the business that I've led, I can tell you, there wasn't a single year where my staff turnover was in excess of 5%. Now, voluntary turnover less than 5% is world's best practice. And the other thing is, people's success. People from diverse backgrounds, if you promote them to their communities, they're far more successful. So I've certainly lived and breathed it, and I've seen the benefits that it provides.
My vision of inclusionary leadership is one that I think has resonated very much with what the other members of the panel have said. First and foremost, it is about celebrating and not tolerating diversity, the same language that was used. And it's a diversity of insights from people either within the organisation or outside the organisation. And it is, I think, important in leadership to have a different ear for both of those stakeholder groups. If you take an organisation like what I have been responsible with, which is looking at an Australian Olympic team, the people who make up an Australian Olympic team reflect the rich diversity of our nation. So it seemed very obvious to me that I ought to have a genuine reflection of the Australian population in the decision-making of the organisation organising that team. So we do have male and female athletes, we do have short and tall athletes, we have 13-year-old swimmers and 50-year-old equestrian athletes. So the diversity across an Olympic team is one that also ought to be reflected in the boardroom when I'm making decisions about those teams. So having a diversity at the seat of the table, if you like, is the first element. But often I don't think just having a seat at the table is enough. If I use the illustration of, say, our Athletes Commission, a very important voice in the context of what we do, they have a seat at the boardroom. There's the chair and the deputy chair that are on our board. But very often for so many years, those athletes feared speaking up. And you can understand why. They're 20-something-year-old athletes who are very good at their sport but have never seen the inside of a boardroom, where they are surrounded by either their heroes or very senior statesmen and women. And it's an intimidating environment. So I very quickly adopted measures by which I could amplify their voice. I'd speak to them before the meeting and understand their views on a few things, and then I'd be able to turn to them in the meeting and say, Steve, might you share your view on it? So it forced them or prompted them to express their views, or indeed I'd speak on their behalf if I knew that they were really shy about putting their case forward. So it's first of all having the diversity of the right people with a seat at the table. Secondly, it's around amplifying that voice of the minority, sometimes when it's required. And the third element for me around inclusive leadership is courage. Di suggested it in the introduction, and that is it's not always easy. If you listen and you give them a seat at the table and you amplify that voice, the one thing you cannot do is ignore it or do nothing. So an illustration again with our Athletes Commission, again, a very strong voice in my mind that ought to guide my leadership. The Athletes Commission for many years have been talking about the difficulty they have in transitioning from being an athlete into the real world. And we see the headlines of Grant Hackett and Thorpe and any other Olympian as they have had those struggles. It's a very real problem. But the AOC for many years had said, well, you know, that's when they're retired, it's not really our business anymore. And for me, it took the courage and the resources to say, no, I'm not tolerating that. Off the back of Rio, we did actually invest in our first athlete transition program, and many of our sponsors wished to be part of that. They wanted to help these Olympians. They wanted to have Olympians in their organisation because they understood the attributes that they carried. So what was seen as dodging for the organisation for many years was actually an opportunity for us to better connect our athletes with careers, with our sponsors, and help them go on to be successful individuals.
Thanks, Fiona. And even though our panel is really diverse in its background and its industry experience, there's some really common themes coming through their messages about inclusion. So this concept of belonging is something, if any of you have done any work with Catalyst, you'll see that's one of the definitions around inclusion. It's not about how people fit in here, it's about how people feel that they belong here. So it is a really big mindset shift for people. I love the celebrating. Like, do we celebrate difference? Do we embrace difference rather than, and check in with yourself. How much of the tolerating do I do? And if I'm tolerating stuff, it's me that's got to change. And I think the other thing that comes through in that story also is about that diversity of thinking. If we have broader range of people in our workplaces, age, every background that we can think of, then of course the diversity of thought is going to be so much greater. And I happened to see Dom Price come in from Atlassian, and I got to hear Dom speak on the great asset of diverse thought at lunchtime today. So this is something that really smart businesses absolutely get and put into practice each and every day around their leadership.